It's no secret that Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios have an Avengers problem, i.e. all their old school Avengers that people liked and really were attached to have basically aged out and moved on with their lives, other than, I guess, Chris Hemsworth really is Thor and a couple of other characters. Mark Ruffalo as Hulk, if you actually like that. I think that character is worn out as welcome, and I'm not really into Super Bro Hulk or whatever the hell you want to call him, Doofus Hulk. Not really exactly my cup of tea, but they do have 2 more Avengers films to get to before the inevitable reboot happens, and it feels like everybody is basically caught on that Avengers Secret Wars will be a reboot of sorts for the MCU itself. Maybe not a hard reboot. They will likely bring some of the actors and actresses that are playing the roles currently back, but it's a way to kind of clean the slate and likely an opportunity to introduce the X-Men. That's what a lot of people are talking about these days. Let's face it, this next lineup of Avengers isn't going to be good. It's going to be Shang-Chi. It's going to be Falcon, Cap. It's going to be Shuri and a bunch of other characters. Maybe Hulk. Maybe Thor will be there and people will enjoy that. But for the most part, it's going to be characters that people have already gotten tired of. And it is probably time for a reboot. But this latest rumor going around, and it actually kind of makes sense, of what they're going to turn the Avengers into is kind of embarrassing. And just a few years ago, it felt like Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios were all set up. They already had their new Trinity of Avengers. They were going to have Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther, Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, and Tom Holland as Spider-Man. They'd already kind of set him up. Obviously, the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, no one really could have saw that happening. It turns out Disney and Sony aren't getting along quite so well anymore, so Tom Holland kind of more up in the air. And perhaps Brie Larson is done with Captain Marvel. We're going to touch on all of those things and then finally tell you what the likely new Avengers team is going to be. Here's a hint. It's the Young Avengers. If you never heard that, wait to the end because you are going to probably have a good laugh. That's what I had. Recent speculation suggests that Avengers Secret War may reboot the MCU, establishing a new timeline after a suspected incursion destroys the MCU's multiverse as audiences know it. A reboot of the MCU isn't expected to be a complete overhaul, as many actors would be assumed to be reprising their roles, and the events of the MCU's prior stories likely wouldn't be forgotten. This same thing occurred in Marvel Comics' 2015 Secret Wars event, which has led many to ponder whether Avengers Secret Wars could realistically pull it off by combining one or more universes into a single timeline. If this is the case, Marvel Studios would be able to start with a clean slate, potentially even introducing mutant characters into the franchise from day one and exploring their rich backstories in the history of the new continuity. And really, we haven't seen a lot of X-Men despite Disney acquiring Fox and the rights back to the X-Men franchise. Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, is an X-Men now. I guess she's the very first X-Men. We also did see, I guess, a cameo of Patrick Stewart as Professor X in that Multiverse of Madness movie. We are going to see Wolverine in the Deadpool movie, but I don't think that's part of canon. So it sounds like there's a good chance, and it kind of makes sense, that the Avengers will not be the A team. They won't be the tentpole of the MCU after Secret Wars. It'll actually be the X-Men, perhaps even Fantastic Four, depending on the reception to that movie and how people really respond to this new cast. You know, the Fantastic Four are a very historical franchise, the first family of Marvel Comics, certainly not the first family of Marvel Studios, but it sounds like they do have big plans for those characters in those universes. And that's really where so many of the amazing villains that you want to play with, you know, in the Marvel Comics universe come out of Fantastic Four. And then a lot of the newer villains that you want to play with probably come more out of the X-Men. So it kind of makes sense that you would move those franchises to the forefront during a reboot and maybe de-emphasize the Avengers themselves. Although the big problem is MCU fans don't see the Fantastic Four and X-Men really on the level of the Avengers. They think the Avengers are the main event, and I think Kevin Feige might be underestimating exactly how popular the Avengers are and how much people are probably going to want new versions of the characters that they love, like Iron Man, Captain America, and some of the other wonderful superheroes that we've had. And let's be honest, they haven't really mined everything yet. There are plenty of great stories left out there for Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, all these wonderful characters. We never really even got a solo Hulk movie, and I don't think anybody wants to see Mark Ruffalo, you know, in a solo Hulk anything. You know what I mean? Just throw that guy to the side and hire somebody that's kind of likable. Even Ed Norton coming back to the role would probably be better in my estimation. Now, one of the big reasons this is happening is because they thought they did have replacement Avengers on hand, and it's not really working. The latest being apparently Brie Larson doesn't like being Captain Marvel. As part of the recently released MCU The Reign of Marvel Studios, author Joanna Robinson revealed Larson has grown disillusioned with working with Marvel Studios. Quote, the future of those Marvel icons was unclear. The departure of the franchise anchors like Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and Scarlett Johansson had already taken its toll. as had the shocking loss of Chadwick Boseman. But other MCU stalwarts were heading for the exits. The Guardians of the Galaxy cast went on a farewell tour. Brie Larson grew disillusioned, and Marvel tussled with Sony in a custody battle over Tom Holland. While speaking on the Ringers The Watch podcast, Robinson followed up her writing in the book, plainly remarking, the toxic backlash means that Brie Larson doesn't want to play Carol Danvers anymore. And I think for a lot of people, the feeling is mutual. I don't personally have anything against Brie Larson. I know a lot of people seem to not really like her. I don't think she's probably a good person with PR. I don't think she was cast very well as Carol Danvers to be somebody that was supposed to be a foundation piece of the Avengers moving forward. They just didn't really give her a lot of things to do. They made her really stale, and it seemed like she really embraced that. And when she went out on her PR tour promoting the movie, she gave so many people reasons not really to support Marvel Studios in her project. Obviously, it was still successful, but it seems like a lot of that was because we did have that sandwich in between the two Infinity War Endgame type movies. A lot of people thought they had to see Captain Marvel when it turned out that wasn't really the case. And we're seeing that right now with the projections for the Marvels themselves. It's way under. For opening weekend, I think they're saying like maybe topping out at $55 million, under $200 million, just for domestic gross. Way under the numbers for the Captain Marvel movie itself. And, and I don't blame Brie Larson. I would get tired of it too. Every time she says anything, there's a news article about it. Hell, I'll make a video about it because it is news and she kind of made herself into the news. It is her fault. I don't feel like she's in the Director X category, you know what I mean? But in a lot of ways, she definitely became her own worst enemy when it came to playing Carol Danvers. So that kind of all ended up blowing up in their face. Obviously, you can't plan for something like happened with Chadwick Boseman. They probably could have planned for something happening like it is with Tom Holland. The deal with Sony. Sony is in the driver's seat. They have all the leverage, and they want to create their own Spider-Man universe. And then it turns out the third pillar, the third piece of the Trinity, your version or what you would like to be Wonder Woman, doesn't really work out. She doesn't really get along with the fans. It seems like she doesn't get along with her co-stars. And it sounds like everybody's kind of ready to move on. So they need to do something. Drastic times call for drastic measures. The X-Men can now be the headliners. You can get a solo Wolverine franchise. You can get an X-Men franchise. Hell, if it's that popular, maybe you can get an X-Force movie or something like that out of it, or maybe a TV show. I'm sure we'll get New Mutants in there, something like that. All the titles that we all know as comic book readers, and maybe even if you're a movie fan, Fantastic Four will also be its own tentpole. And they're taking a risk, it sounds like, likely, with the Avengers team itself. It's claimed the Young Avengers are coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that part of the team includes Haley Steinfeld, who plays Kate Bishop in the MCU. The info follows it said, Avengers Secret Wars will reboot the MCU, and that instead of going with a new MCU Trinity, Kevin Feige has switched gears and is going with a new team of young assemblers. According to the Can We Get Some Toast Twitter account, making up the MCU's Young Avengers currently includes America Chavez, Billy Kaplan, a.k.a. Wiccan, Cassie Lang, a.k.a. Stinger, Elijah Bradley, a.k.a. Patriot, Kamala Khan, also known as Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop Hawkeye, Riri Williams Ironheart, and Tommy Speed. And we have certainly seen a number of these characters already be introduced into the MCU as we know it today. And they're not really young anymore. Like the Young Avengers are anxious millennial Avengers. They're really young, trying to be trendy. It just sucked. The whole concept was bad. They tried to replace the Avengers with Young Avengers. It didn't work out in the comic books, but a lot of these actors are a bit older. I think the only one that's even a teenager is the lady that played America Chavez. I believe Haley Steinfeld is in her mid to late 20s at this point, and a lot of these other actors are a bit older. But when you look at the characters that they have introduced in the MCU, there have been so many bad ones. The Kate Bishop Hawkeye one is the only one that really works because Haley Steinfeld as an actress is genuinely likable. Like she can pull off a role like that. And I do think the tweaks that the MCU made with the Kate Bishop character kind of saved it because Kate Bishop in comic books is almost unbearably bad. Like I hate that version of the character, but I did enjoy the Hawkeye show, and I thought her relationship with Clint Barton was really well pulled off, and they had a nice chemistry. So I can kind of see that, but none of the other things have really worked out. I think they probably got the right actress for Kamala Khan, Iman Vellani. She seems really nice. She seems sweet and all that stuff, but nobody watched the Miss Marvel show because no one cared about the character. And it appears that they're going to lose money on the Marvels movie. Like the trending is really bad on that one because nobody cares about her or Captain Marvel. That's not exactly what you want to see with one of your new headline features for the new Young Avengers team. You know, America Chavez, one of the worst parts about the Multiverse of Madness movie, and there are a lot of bad parts about that movie. When I think of Ironheart, Riri Williams, what's her name, Dominic something, I can't remember the name of the actress. That was the lamest part of a not very good Black Panther sequel. She was a complete duplicate character of Shuri. There was no reason to even have that character other than they wanted to introduce her. And supposedly they've scrapped that TV show too because there isn't much interest in there. Elijah Bradley as Patriot, people don't even probably realize that Elijah Bradley was introduced into the MCU during the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show on Disney+. You know, they probably think about his grandpa, you know, Isaiah Bradley, which I thought was an interesting, potentially compelling piece of that story. It just never panned out. But Elijah Bradley was there, but they never called him Patriot. He certainly wasn't introduced as a hero or anything like that. So people aren't thinking about that character. The Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania was really bad. Cassie Lang was a really enormous part of that. The actress they got to play Stinger or whatever was awful, like really awful, just terribly off-putting. And they've done so many bad castings at this point. Like, I don't think that you can go along with this while keeping all the actors that you have. Like, you're going to have to make wholesale changes to these characters and what they stand for and who they are just to make them palatable to a mass audience. These are very niche characters. Like I said, they're the anxious millennial Avengers team. Like, they got one win, that was Haley Steinfeld, but the rest were really all swings and misses. And I don't see how this is ever going to work. It's never going to stand up to a good X-Men team. It's not even going to stand up to Fantastic Four. And it's only going to pale in comparison to the Avengers team, not only comic book fans, but movie fans know and love. They want to see Cap. They want to see Iron Man, they want to see Thor, they want to see Hulk, they want to see the real Hawkeye, they want to see Black Widow, they want to see all those characters working together, hopefully some Spider-Man in there, but they're not really going to get that. You're going to get cheap knockoff, lame-ass, anxious versions of them, and I don't think anybody's clamoring for this. So Kevin Feige, I understand they're retooling the TV shows, and it's obvious that this Avengers lineup that they have right now is not going to work. And you're going to see diminishing returns until they actually hit the reboot at Secret Wars. But they're going to have to come up with something better than that. They're going to have to come up with maybe Secret Avengers, the Illuminati, something interesting, because Young Avengers is not going to cut it. And when it comes to the mainstream audience, when it comes to the movie audience, when they think about the tentpole franchise, they're thinking about the Avengers. And you probably don't want to let everybody down. Once people start to get an idea of where the Avengers are heading, and they're like, oh, maybe I don't want to invest in this reboot because none of my favorite heroes are coming back anyway. We're not going to do more adventures with them. We're going to do lame-ass, watered-down adventures with lame-ass, watered-down versions of those characters that never worked in comic books and certainly aren't working in streaming and are not going to work as a reboot of the Avengers team after Secret Wars, in my opinion. But this has been going on for a long time. Kevin Feige is in a terrible place, and I don't think he wants to admit that he's going to have to reboot probably everything from scratch and bring back the OG Avengers team. He thought these guys were going to handle it. And at this point, thankfully, he's figured out that it's wrong, that the Z-list Avengers aren't what's going to put asses in seats, but he's going to have to do more work than this. There's also a link in the video description.